Breaking news from the stadium tonight as an anonymous fan foot the bill for 55,000 hot dogs, bringing that sweet tubed meat to everyone in attendance.
Free dogs! Yeah!
55,000 hot dogs? What does that even cost?
While the identity of this Frankfurter philanthropist remains anonymous, their all-beefy generosity will go down in history.
The new Mega Millions. More to win means more to give. How you spend it is up to you. Yeah!
For game odds and details, visit sceducationlottery.com.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Welcome to A Pair of Bookends, the book club you can carry anywhere. I'm your host, Hannah MacDonald, and I'll be bookending the conversation with some of the most exciting voices from the bookish world. Welcome to another episode in our debut Spotlight series, where we shine a light on the freshest authors and their work. Today we are spotlighting the work of debut novelist Jennifer Trevelyan. Her novel, A Beautiful Family, was described by author Leanne Moriarty as an extraordinary, exquisitely written debut, and I couldn't agree more. Jennifer is a writer based in New Zealand. She first worked as a wedding photographer and photographic printer before studying English literature at Victoria University. She then moved on to London to work in children's publishing. In 2022, Jennifer undertook an MA in creative writing at the International Institute of Modern Letters back in New Zealand, and her debut novel, A Beautiful Family, is out now and published by Mantle in the UK, and it's also out in Australia, New Zealand and the US. Here to chat all about it, welcome Jennifer to A Pair of Bookends.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. I'm so pleased that we've been able to make this work because, as I said to you before, we have quite a drastic time difference. I think it's the first time that I've done this, so I'm really pleased that I'm really pleased that we've made this work. I think I spoke to Madeline Gray in Australia, but I think it's 13 hours with us, so I'm so glad that you're doing this. As I said to you before we started recording, I absolutely loved your book, A Beautiful Family, and I'm really excited to get into it, but I do like to open by asking what you're currently reading.
Yes, I'm a really bad reader when I'm writing a novel, which I'm trying to do at the moment. I find it really hard to pick up a novel and stick with it when my head is so far into what I'm writing. So I read really strategically when I'm writing, and I tend to dip in and out of things that I've read in the past that I know I loved. So at the moment I am dipping in and out of Bel Canto by Anne Patchett, which I think is just a masterpiece. I love that book. It's so beautifully written. And at the same time I'm dipping in and out of Picnic at Hanging Rock, actually, which is an Australian classic by Joan Lindsay. And they're both kind of similar because they have this third person omniscient narrator, and they're very witty and very elegant writing. And I think it's interesting that I'm reading both of those at the same time because they do have some similarities.
I love that, and I love that you said that when you're writing you've got to reread things rather than read something fresh, because I think it's so hard to not kind of take on someone else's voice, isn't it? And I suppose when you've already read something there's less of an opportunity to do that. I'm currently writing myself. I'm working on my debut novel, and
wow.
I know. I try not to say it on the podcast because I get really embarrassed about it.
No.
But I think when I first started trying to write it a few years ago now, it was probably back in, I think, maybe 2021. And I think one of my favourite writers is Sally Rooney, and I was reading Beautiful World, Where Are You at the time, and I sat down to write, and I could just tell that I was trying to replicate that voice, and it's so hard to stop yourself when you really admire a writer.
Yes. There are certain writers I really avoid when I'm writing because I know I have a tendency to mimic their voice. Yeah, it's sad because I love reading and I'm writing so much now that reading has to sort of be on the back burner. But the last book I did pick up and read through cover to cover when I was having a little break was You Are Here by David Nichols, which I really loved. And I love all his work.
Oh, he's just brilliant, isn't he?
Yeah,
I love him so much.
Yeah.
Although I haven't read that book yet, so I do need to get to that
It's
one.
good. I recommend.
Yeah. Before we also dive into your book, I do like to open our debut spotlight episodes by asking about your journey as a debut writer. I would love to know how that's been for you.
Yeah, it was a really long journey. I kind of always wanted to be a writer. I'm 50 now, and I just, when I was younger, I don't think unlike Sally Rooney, for example, I just don't think I really thought I had anything to say in my 20s and 30s. I would sit down and start writing, and I just felt I didn't kind of know enough about the world or know what my voice was at that age. But then when I turned 39, I realized if I don't take this seriously soon, it might never happen. And I started going out in the morning before work and writing at a cafe. And my husband would take care of the kids before school and stuff, which was great. And I did that for about 10 years. And I actually wrote, I think A Beautiful Family was the fourth novel I completed.
Wow.
Yeah. And the other, I was just sort of teaching myself how to write novels myself, and learning as I went. And the other novels went into the straw, and because I kind of knew they weren't good enough. And then A Beautiful Family I knew it was by far the best thing I had written, but I also knew I hadn't quite got it there. And sadly, that went in the drawer as well. And I meant to put it in the drawer for 3 months, and it ended up in the drawer for 3 years, which is just kind of being a working mum and COVID and all this stuff. Just 3 months turned into 3 years. And I did the MA, during which I wrote another novel. And at the end of that, I thought, you know what, I need to get that book out and see if it's as good as I remember it. So I took it out of the drawer and I managed to get an assessment here in New Zealand through the New Zealand Society of Authors. And that assessment was very positive. And he said, you know what, you should send this to agents. So I sent it to some agents, not many, about 4, and 2 of them rejected it after reading the first 3 chapters, and one of them I'm still waiting to hear from. And the other one was Felicity Blunt, and she loved it and snapped it up.
Oh, well, thank God for Felicity.
I know, it's crazy. It feels like a sort of sliding doors thing. Like if she hadn't picked it up, where would I be now?
I mean, that's an incredible amount of perseverance and dedication to be doing that before work every day.
Yeah,
and
I with my children after school, that was really the highlight for me.
I mean, that I can understand that, but it also and it's incredible that you're so passionate about your writing that you would take that time to do that before going on to your normal working day and then being with your children.
I know.
But let's just take a moment that this was your 4th novel that you completed and you just kept going. Like, that's incredible.
No, crazy. I know. Well, actually, looking back, I don't think I really knew how to write a second draft.
Okay.
So I would write a first draft, and there's plenty of advice on the internet, and I don't know why I didn't take it. And everyone says, be prepared, your first draft will be really bad. But I would finish that first draft and then I would read it, and the cringe factor was so bad. I just couldn't bear it, and I would stick them in the drawer, whereas what I should have done is knuckle down and do a second draft. It took me a while to figure that out. And actually the MA that I did was probably the best thing I did in terms of teaching me how to produce a second draft.
I think it's hard though, isn't it, when you're first working on something. I find it really hard to, if I read through my work, to find where I'm up to in the scene that I'm at. I find it really hard to read through and not just start editing what I've already written, rather than to just continue what I'm supposed to be writing.
And I actually don't know what's best, whether it's best to edit as you go so that you don't get a horrible shock when you go back and read it, or whether you should just plow on and get to the end. I truly haven't figured that out yet, what the best process is. But there was also always these shiny new ideas that I wanted to pursue as well. So you'd finish one book and there's a lot of work in going back and making it better. Whereas, there's a really shiny new idea over here that I could pursue. And you always think the next idea is going to be the best one. So I was doing that for quite a long time.
Well, I mean, your shiny new idea earlier was A Beautiful Family, and
Yeah.
I'm really glad that you persevered with this one and didn't put it in a drawer, and it's made it out into the world and into my hands, because I thoroughly enjoyed this book. And there's so much that I want to ask you about. But firstly, could you tell us what A Beautiful Family is about?
Sure, I'll try. I would call it a sort of coming of age mystery novel. It's set in 1985 in New Zealand on a wild stretch of coast, and it's about a young girl who goes away with her family, and she befriends a boy on the beach, and they decide to try and solve a local mystery together. But meanwhile, things are happening within her family that are perhaps even scarier than the mystery they're trying to solve. I'll leave it at that. Do you think that?
I love that. You've definitely lent into the mystery element, and I want to start by asking you about the narrator of this story, which is a 10-year-old girl. What was it like stepping into the mind of a child?
Oh, I loved that. That was my favorite part, actually. And I think I thought to myself, I just want to have some fun. And fun to me was being 10 years old again in 1985. She's a real character. She's a slightly unusual kid. She's not me, but there are definitely aspects of her that I recognize in myself. I probably enjoy that part of writing the most, is slipping into other characters. That's the thing I find easiest. So I sort of got her voice. It maybe took, maybe a few chapters to find that voice, and then I was off. I just loved it. It was a huge exercise in escapism for me.
It was so wonderful to read from her perspective as well. But as I was saying to you before we started recording, that she is this unreliable narrator, and she's not purposefully trying to be unreliable. It's just that there's certain things that she
so
doesn't.
Hard to get everything right.
But she doesn't understand yet, isn't there? And she's not quite grasped certain things that are going on in her life and in the world. So there's certain things that we might notice as adults that she wouldn't notice, and there's certain things that she'll see in a certain light that we would see differently. What did you find were the sort of pros and cons of having her as narrator?
Yeah, well, on the one hand, it was very limiting, and it did determine what kind of novel the book could be. I realized I couldn't, for example, have an extensive police investigation when 10-year-old. Yeah. So what I tried to do instead is create that. I don't know if you have this, but when you look back at your childhood, there are memories you have and you don't know if they're true and real, or if you just imagined them.
Yeah.
And there'll be people in your family that say, no, that didn't happen that way, or that never happened. And you think, what? I'm sure it did. And I was trying to sort of recreate that. And I had the idea that this narrator has grown up and she's looking back on when she was 10 years old, and she's trying to figure out whether her memories are real and did that crazy summer really happen. So the voice allowed me to do that. And then I also knew that there would be a lot of tension in that gap between what the narrator can comprehend and what the adult reader can comprehend, which was obviously so much darker. So I tried to just exploit that as much as possible.
I love that. In particular, I loved the family dynamics. I love reading about family dynamics, especially when it's complex and there's stuff going on underneath the surface.
Yeah.
And what I really enjoyed was how she would observe her parents. And there were certain things that she would do. This isn't an exact example, but she'd do things like if a rug wasn't at a certain angle, then everything wouldn't be okay, or things wouldn't be okay if things were, and she'd make these observations. And she also says at one point in the book, we were not a proper family. And I wanted to ask where you think this idea for her of a proper family comes from.
It's quite sad when she says that.
Yeah.
I think she just feels that they're very lonely on that holiday, and her friend that she's met on the beach, whose name is Kahu, is surrounded by cousins and aunts and uncles, and the house he's staying at is really lively and full of noise and colour and food, and I think she feels like they're just this funny little group of 4 people and they're not getting along very well, and that terrifies her, and they're not rubbing up against each other the way they should be. I think that's what she's getting at there. And in terms of her little superstitions, she is trying to control her universe, I think, and 10-year-olds don't have much control. So she tries to control her universe by getting the lyrics right on her favourite songs each morning. And, if she gets a lyric wrong, then something terrible is going to happen to someone in her family. I used to do that a lot. I was very superstitious. I don't know if it's just me, and I also had these crazy notions that I could control the weather with my eyes. This funny stuff. if I stare hard enough at that cloud, it will go away. So I was sort of tapping into all of that. Yeah, she's got a huge imagination, so she's quite fun to write
She does. And I really loved the sister dynamics as well, because you can tell she really there's that funny thing about sisters where you really admire them in one instance, but in another you just clash
despise
so
them.
much. Yeah, you despise them and you clash so much. And
yeah, your skin crawls.
yeah,
Yeah.
where did their dynamic come from?
I'm the youngest of 3 girls.
Oh man.
Yeah. And I remember
I'm
that
the
feeling.
oldest of 3 girls.
There you go. That's interesting. We would have a really different perspective probably. But so yes, my oldest sister I always thought was this very sophisticated, glamorous creature. I really didn't connect very much with her when I was younger at all, because she was 7 years older. But my middle sister was more like my little buddy. And there did come a time when she began to pull away and obviously become a teenager and grow up, and I was left behind. And there was a kind of resentment about that and a fascination. And at the same time, I didn't really want to grow up. I could see my sisters getting moodier and sort of having more complicated lives. And I said, I don't know if I want that. My life is so easy and simple. So it's a really interesting dynamic. And you also, I think, you want to protect your sisters and keep them from getting into trouble. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, maybe sometimes you're a bit competitive and want them to get in trouble. So it's extremely confusing. But Alex worries a lot about her sister, and I think just wants to keep her close.
She does. But I also think that Alex's loyalty is often used as a weapon. And I found that aspect really interesting, because at times you're like, why is she staying so loyal? And you're like, well, you do, don't you?
I think so, yeah. I don't know if this still exists now, but in the 80s, the worst thing you could be was a tattletale or a snitch or whatever. Yeah. Oh, yes, the loyalty between siblings and cousins and friends was intense, and you just did not tell. And I was interested to see how far I could push that. Like, how bad do things have to get for Alex to tell an adult what's going on, you know? Then I also think Alex is quite a secretive little kid and keeps a lot to herself, which I think maybe when you're the youngest you do, because you do realize that there's a lot you're not understanding, and you think, I'm going to sound stupid if I say this or this, so you just don't say anything. You become quite quiet. So yeah, I think the loyalty is partly true loyalty and partly not wanting to make a fool of herself and get it all wrong.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about her family is that we see more of her sister, because I think they're at similar ages to what they are to her parents, of course. So you think you've got a better idea or a better grasp of her sister's character than you do of the parents. But I do want to ask about the characters, that the parents, because the mother I was particularly fascinated by, because she likes to, sit and she's writing something, and we think she's, writing a book, but it could be anything. But from Alex's perspective, she's working on a book, and then she goes on these walks on the beaches, and we don't quite know what these walks are for. And there's a lot that's kind of obviously hidden, because there's things that Alex doesn't understand. So what was it like writing the parents, but without giving away too much? Because of course you're looking through the lens of Alex.
Yeah. I mean, I think I always knew what I thought the parents were doing. I wanted to make it plausible what Alex sees and doesn't see, and I didn't want her to overhear too many conversations, because that could get a bit ridiculous. But I think parents are quite mysterious to children.
Yes.
Alex is at that age where she's starting to see them a little bit more for what they really are, and starting to question things they say, rather than just sort of following them slavishly the way you do when you're really little. And I think her loyalty to her mother is being tested, and possibly snaps a bit during this summer. Yeah, she definitely starts to lean toward her father, who I think she says at one point in the book that she sees him as the underdog that summer. So she's quite angry with her mother. I think I put a little bit of myself into the mother, in terms of how selfishly you have to write a book, like how selfish you are when you're writing a book, and how, I think I was probably feeling a bit disgusted with myself, because I've been writing for 10 years and, taking myself off every morning and writing. And what did that look like to my kids? So there's a bit of that in there, I think. I think the mother's a bit bored, a bit unfulfilled. She feels Vanessa's growing up, pulling away. what's she going to be left with? She doesn't have a job. It's the 80s. She's essentially a housewife. This book that she's writing would mean a lot to her, you know? It would be really, really, really important. But it's kind of like for any working mother or any mother, it's kind of squished into the gaps in between everybody else's needs. So I was conscious of all of that when I was trying to paint this picture of the mother.
She's so interested that you've said that you felt disgusted with yourself for taking that time for yourself, but I think it's so specific to mothers, isn't it? Like it's
you feel guilty.
Everyone's that's crazy because you deserve this time. You deserve to have your own things going on.
Well, I know, but I know, right? But like I started writing when my daughter was about, so if I was 30, she was quite little, like maybe 6 or 7, and or even younger, and she still sort of needed her hair done in the mornings and bits of uniform found, and lunches put out, and I just left. I let my husband do that. He doesn't know how to plait a girl's hair.
Oh.
And it was great actually, because they managed and they sort of learned that actually dad can get quite grumpy in the mornings too. It's not just but that's what I had to do, and it was really crucial actually. I think carving out a little bit of time and making it like ring fencing it and saying nothing is going to stop me from writing at this time in this place every day, it was the best thing I could have done.
Well, I'm really glad that you did. As I've said, one thing in the book that made me really nostalgic for my own childhood was the intense friendships that we built on holidays. And you feel like you're never going to have a friend like that again, and you feel devastated when you leave them. And even though you're with them for such a short space of time, it feels like they're the bestest friend you've ever had.
Yeah.
And Alex meets this boy called, is it Kahu?
Kahu.
And completely adores him, and they have these little adventures together. They think they're these investigators for a missing, a child that went missing that was presumed drowned, I believe. And they are trying to figure out what's happened to this child. And they're hopeful to solve the question of this case. What drew you to their friendship? And I'd also love to know whether the missing child case came from any specific case that you'd seen in real life.
I didn't actually know. So the friendship, I think that character of Kahu is probably a couple of people from my childhood sort of rolled into one. I had a very, very close friend, my best friend in all the world, who left New Zealand when I was 12 and went to live in the UK. And in those days, there was no social media. There's no way of keeping in touch except for letters, which we did do for a while. But it was really, honestly, the most traumatic thing that had ever happened to me. It broke my heart when she left. So that I think some of the sort of nostalgia in the book and the longing that you feel is that. And then I also had a boy cousin, who was this absolute character, and we used to run around, and he would look for adventures like that. He would love to have solved a mystery of a missing child. So I think it was a combination of those people from my own childhood. In terms of the missing child, no, that wasn't a specific case. But the whole idea was inspired by the fact that I did go on holiday with my family in that area around that time. And we were staying in this beach house. And in the beach house next door, there was this creepy guy. And he was creepy. And that stayed with me forever. Yes, I'll leave it at that. But that was the inspiration. Yes.
I mean, you've got to be so careful talking about this character, but he is so creepy. And there was a point in the book where I was thinking, is this just because she's a child? And, as children, we are intimidated by adults. And you just realise that he is a creepy person. And I can't say anything else.
Yeah. Well, I was interested in how I think we have quite strong instincts as children. And I think we slowly learned, we're taught really to kind of ignore those instincts and to be polite and do as you're told and not make a scene and not embarrass anyone. But really, Alex has this gut reaction to this character right from the start. And I wanted to explore really this child knowing something. I'm trying not to give any spoilers. And all the adults around her who should have so much more knowledge are not able to see it.
That's true.
Yeah.
There's a very early scene that I don't think gives anything away, where she comes across the neighbour and her mum has gone on one of her beach walks and isn't there when Alex comes out of the water, and he is. And
Yes.
it is such an intense couple of pages where you have no idea what direction the story's about to go in, because there's this really intense interaction between them where you can feel the alarm bells going off in Alex's head.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're just having a normal conversation. And he's saying that, you know, where's your mum? Are you okay? Like any adult would ask a child that's on their own. But you just feel that there's some kind of, you're almost like screaming at the book, like run away or something. And there's nothing dramatic that happens there. But just in that scene, it's so intense. And I'd love to ask you actually, in terms of writing, because I think you're so great at building pace and tension. How do you go about doing that in your work?
Oh gosh, that scene, interesting that you bring that up, because I rewrote that scene so many times.
Really?
Yeah, and it was just getting that really delicate balance. So the mechanics of the scene stayed the same right from the start. They never changed, but the words I kept tweaking. So at first it was just too strong. It was a little bit too obvious what was going on, and then it was too subtle, and then it was the amount of work. So, you know, it looks really fresh and smooth on the page, but it wasn't like that. It was a real delicate balance. And that's what those scenes always are, I think, the pace and the tension of those scenes. Especially towards the end, I was really careful to not rush, even when obviously things are becoming quite urgent and the reader wants you to move fast. I think it's quite important that you remain not slow exactly, but you continue to have all that detail that you've had throughout the book. So in other words, all the detail that makes each scene feel real still needs to be there towards the end when you're starting to really push the pace and the tension. But as I say, it's just this balancing act. And often I found that a scene's structure would remain the same, but I would be tweaking the language many times over to get that balance right.
I mean, whatever you did there really works, because there was so many times in the book where I felt like I couldn't breathe because I was so nervous about like what was about to happen.
Oh, that's really good to hear that.
No, it's so well written and I really, really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I do want to ask, before I round off with a recommendation, what writers you feel have influenced your work?
Oh gosh, so many. I think growing up I was really into Gothic stories. I was a big fan of Wuthering Heights and Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. And then I went through my Stephen King phase that everyone has to go through when they're in their teens. And then latterly, a lot of American writers, women often, Anne Tyler, Elizabeth Strout, Carol Shields, gosh, Joyce Carol Oates, Donna Tartt. I don't know why so many Americans. I just, yeah, I'm not sure what that is, but I think possibly actually the American culture has really well seeped into New Zealand culture quite a lot. Some of the interesting comments from editors was, oh, this is quite an American term. Are you sure you meant to use this term? And I'm, yeah, that's actually how we speak in New Zealand. So a lot of American women writers have influenced me. And lately I've been reading, because I do find it hard to concentrate on a novel when I'm writing, I've been reading a lot of short stories.
Yes.
And I've been getting really into Shirley Jackson and Claire Keegan and other short story writers. Yeah.
That's a really interesting crossover actually, because you've got the kind of as I said then, like the tension and the kind of this unsettling atmosphere that you would find with Shirley Jackson and with Stephen King, but then you've also got the complex characters like you'd find in Claire Keegan's work.
I know.
But you are very much your own wonderful writer, so I don't want to think, you don't need to think I'm taking away from you. It's cool to know people's influences.
Yeah, I think you are drawn to writers that explore things that you're interested in exploring. And I do always seem to come up with ideas that turn dark, but I am interested in character probably and relationships more than anything.
And you write relationships so well. I was so fascinated by that family. And I would love to ask you, what is next for you?
Oh, yes, I'm working on something. It's set in New Zealand in a kind of beautiful but quite slightly wild and dangerous landscape, which I seem to love. And I've tried to sort of do something. There's a saying that you should be writing the novel that it scares you to write. So I thought, because I had spent all this time in this really close first-person narration, I'm doing multiple points of view, and yeah, that's a challenge. So, but I'm enjoying that. That's what I'm doing at the moment. We'll see if it ends up.
Oh, I can't wait. I really hope that I get to read that one day. And I really loved A Beautiful Family. Before I let you go, Jennifer, I would love to finish by asking for a recommendation. So what would you like to recommend to the listeners?
I'm going to talk about TV because, as I've already said, I'm not the greatest reader when I'm writing, and there's just so much brilliant television on now, and I find it really inspiring at the end of the day when my brain's a bit exhausted to sit on the couch and watch really quality TV. So we've been watching a show that almost passed me by called The Morning Show with Jennifer Aniston.
So good.
It's so good, and I'm loving it. And I'm loving it for its actually really complicated characters who are neither good nor bad. And I think it's amazing how they're handling that. And the acting, of course, is brilliant. And it's very funny. So I'm really enjoying that. And we've been watching The Last of Us, which I hadn't heard about until recently, and loving that and interested in how they deal with backstory, actually. Yeah, the way that they'll have an episode which is entirely backstory.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting and it's brave. I don't know whether that's from it being a video game, but I think that's also great television.
Have you finished the new season?
No, so please don't tell me anything.
I will not. Where are you up to?
Yeah, it's special. I'm up to, gosh, I can't quite think where I'm up to. I'm not up to the one where, do I spoilers?
You've got to be careful.
I know, right?
The big...
Someone who goes, what?
Yes.
So the big thing has happened.
Great, okay. I know you've been, okay.
And I was
worrying for you then.
Yeah, I thought, I can't, what are they doing? I can't keep watching it. I was so upset when that happened.
Me too. Me too. Yeah. We won't give spoilers.
No.
But you've given so many great recommendations. Those two TV series are incredible. But also you've actually given us so many great writers that people can dive into their work. But for our listeners, we are here to celebrate your work. So congratulations on a beautiful book, which is called A Beautiful Family.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for coming on the podcast today. Where can the listeners find you online?
I'm on Instagram mostly, actually. For Trevelyan, pretty easy to find on Instagram.
Amazing. Yeah. I will pop a link to your Instagram in the show notes, and I will also, for the listeners, pop a couple of links in the show notes because, as I said before, this book is available in the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and the US, and I can only imagine the success and the praise that this book is going to receive because it's great and it's perfect for summer, and we're coming up to summer, so everybody get on it. And for our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to rate, review and subscribe, and if you want to give us a follow, you can do so at A Pair of Bookends Pod on Instagram and at A Pair of Bookends on Twitter and TikTok. Go buy A Beautiful Family, go give Jennifer a follow, and lastly, thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great fun.
Thank you, and thank you, listeners, for listening. Goodbye.
Breaking news from the stadium tonight as an anonymous fan foot the bill for 55,000 hot dogs, bringing that sweet tubed meat to everyone in attendance.
Free dogs! Yeah!
55,000 hot dogs? What does that even cost?
While the identity of this Frankfurter philanthropist remains anonymous, their all-beefy generosity will go down in history.
The new Mega Millions. More to win means more to give. How you spend it is up to you. Yeah!
For game odds and details, visit sceducationlottery.com.